Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Mr. Secretary, thank you for taking time. I know you just heard that incredibly emotional words from Lashai Miran-Lavi, the spouse of one of the hostages. Where do you see things standing now?
Well, Griff, it's great to be with you. And it's just heartbreaking to hear the hostage family stories. It's heartbreaking for those who've lost loved ones. Remember, we're now coming on 2 years on. The tragedy of what Hamas did should never be forgotten. And in that same sense, we should never forget who is responsible for this. I know these families want the Americans and the Israelis to do everything they can to get them home. I'm confident that they're doing that. But it is the Iranian regime. It is Hamas, these terrorist barbarians that are continuing to hold hostages. And it should come as no surprise to anyone that they took these hostages for a reason. It was what kept them in power. And the fact that they're now down to just a handful of hostages is going to be the most hard sticking point, because they are the last leverage that Hamas has to maintain control over the Gazan people. And so I'm very hopeful President Trump and Prime Minister Netanyahu will deliver a ceasefire deal that makes sense for Israel, gets the hostages home, and eliminates the threat that something like what happened on October 7th can ever happen again.
Mr. Secretary, do you see this as a setback when Steve Witkoff just packed up his tent and left Qatar? And then, of course, yesterday we heard President Trump sort of intimating that maybe this is a step backwards, saying ultimately Israel needed to, quote, finish the job.
Griff, I dealt with, the Secretary said, I dealt with hostage situations. I dealt with conflict. What you can see is the reminder that evil roams the earth, that these guys haven't given up their intention. That is, neither Hamas nor the regime in Iran has actually given up any intention to continue to destroy Israel. I'm confident if we just let it go, if we just said it's all fine, knock yourselves out, send the hostages back, we're going to let Hamas stand power, they'll take hostages again next week. This is who they are. They must be defeated. And I think President's comment that said we have to finish the job is spot on. They have to be eliminated. Their weapons have to be taken out of their hands. The political leadership in Gaza has to be fundamentally reshaped, reformed. It can't be Hamas. It can't be Iran. If we don't get those things right, Griff, we'll be right back at this. Even if we were blessed enough to get all of these hostages home that remain alive and the bodies of those that are still inside of Gaza, we have to remember they took Americans hostage in 1979. They've killed Americans. They'll take hostages again. They're still holding folks in Evin prison. This is not a short-term problem. This is a long-term challenge we have to win.
You know, talking about problems, clearly the situation inside Gaza with regards to aid is turning into a dire one. And I thought it was interesting just about an hour or so ago, Mr. Secretary, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer tweeted about it, taking a pretty hard line on Israel, saying Israel must allow aid in overland to and the starvation unfolding in Gaza. The situation is desperate. We are working with Jordans to get aid into Gaza. What do you make? Is there daylight here between Keir Starmer and maybe President Trump and, of course, Israel, which has denied any claims that they're in any way precluding stopping aid from getting inside of Gaza?
Griff, Prime Minister Starmer's statement is just fundamentally fraudulent. The Israelis, who are fighting an enemy that's trying to kill them, is providing food to the Gazan people in wartime. As a matter of historical fact, right, to feed your adversary and their civilians while you're still at war with them, that's really quite something. Not only that, the Israelis have provided infrastructure so that food can actually reach the Gazan people. It is the United Nations, the Europeans that have funded UNRWA, that have allowed this food to fall into the hands of Hamas, which provided the very money that killed Americans and Israelis. And so Prime Minister Starmer has this just absolutely backwards. The Israelis are trying to get food in. They're working with the Global Humanitarian Fund to actually achieve that. They need to make sure that that food actually gets to the Gazan people, that Hamas doesn't use this food to steal it, sell it, rearm, and kill and terrorize the region again.
Well, it's certainly going to be an interesting conversation between President Trump and Prime Minister Keir Starmer when it comes to this topic. Former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, thank you for taking time.
Griff, thank you. Have a nice weekend, sir.
You too.